This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are here in the mobile studio at the Consumer Electronics Show, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to snag our guest today, Tony Warner. Tony, welcome to the mobile studio.
Thank you for having me.
So Tony I keep still referring to you as CTO for Comcast, but your official title now is President Comcast Technologies, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
But it's essentially the CTO.
It's essentially the CTO role. And Tony and I have known each other when I was still CTO at HP. You were CTO at Comcast and a great customer of ours at HP. And you used to come out and get to be able to do a little dog and pony show with you and show you some of the newer, funkier stuff that we were doing at HP. But I thought it would be interesting to have a conversation given that you and I both have been CTOs at large organizations where you're trying to have both an execution side of your work and the technology strategy and technology vision, which is always kind of you almost have to be schizophrenic to take these CTO roles today. So talk a little bit about your background and experience. How did what was your career to get to the point where you've been able to achieve this kind of success, particularly at Comcast?
Well, it is interesting, and quite frankly, I didn't know what you're going to talk to me about today, so you put me a little bit on the spot. So let me just riff a little bit. I for longest time I was the number 2 guy that everybody looked to because the number 1 guy was off a little bit in the clouds, and when people really needed to get stuff done, they would say, "Okay, he's great, visionary, but Tony, we got to get this out the door. We got to get this." And I was there for a long time, and then I took the job at TCI. I'd been number 2 at Rogers, highly regarded, loved it. Had a great mentor there, Nick Hamilton Piercy. Left there because I was intrigued by TCI and John Malone and everything they had going, and I took the number 2 role there. And there was you never underestimate that when they say success is when opportunity meets preparation, and I don't want to overstate that, but I was been there just almost a year, not quite. Had a little teeny office inside. Always trying to figure out, because I was brought in without really a mission or a staff, and trying to figure out where I could create value, and was not doing bad. And I was in this little office and looked down, my phone was ringing, and it said John Malone. And, I'm thinking, all right, who's pulling a trick on me? Here's, so I pick it up, and Tony, and he says, "Hey, Tony, John Malone here. Listen, I've got a problem, and I'm told you'd be a good guy to help me with it. Would you mind setting up some time or coming up to my office and helping me?" Sure. And so I went up and met with him, and it was interesting. And he had 9 or 10 suppositions, and it was at a time when TCI was in turmoil, and he was just back taking over. And he gave me 9 or 10 suppositions. He said, I've looked at all the numbers, and fiber isn't taking trouble calls down, because I looked at all these places where you've installed a lot of fiber, and it's actually trouble calls are higher. So I think we're wasting money on fiber. And he went down, he had 9 or 10 different pieces. Sub return on the 5 to 40 is not going to work. There's too much interference and noise. And if you ever do get it to work, you're going to collapse under your own strength because you don't have enough bandwidth down there to do it. And, and he had 9 or 10 of these, and he said, I'm listening, I got to figure out our capital plan. And so I said, can I have, 2 weeks to come back to you with this? And he said, yeah. And so I set up a meeting with him for 2 weeks. And I had a small staff of 8-9 folks, really good engineers. And I drug in a lot of people from the outside, people not unlike yourself, but people I respected that had expertise. And I set up a meeting with John for about 2 weeks after. And by the time that meeting got scheduled, all these people showed up. And I was, intimidated as hell. And it was John, and it was me, and then this audience, okay? But it was me and John, and and I went through, And I had done all the facts. We did traffic engineering to show him how much we could do in the upstream. We did all of these things. And it just ended up resonating with him. And he bought everything I said. And then he had one other guy who he'd obviously given similar. And this person hadn't taken it nearly as seriously, evidently. And they got up there and they started going through how wireless was going to work and all this. And finally, John got frustrated with them and said, listen, so what you're saying is you don't have an answer. The guy says, you're right, we just don't have an answer. And he says, then why in the hell are you wasting my time? Get out of here. And after that, it was about 3 weeks later that John called me up and told me I was the CTO. Okay. And I was thinking, wow. Okay. So it was never underestimate an opportunity and when to prepare for it and how to do it. And not that they always work out and not that I'm always prepared. And I've probably missed as many as I've made. But at that point, you know, after that, and one of the things that has been, I think, the key function of the CTO is you do get a vision, you get a belief, and then your job is to start putting enough meat and enough promise on the bones that you get the financing from the company, because you need the CEO to be saying, okay, we're going to put 100 million, 200 million, 300 million behind this. And then your job is to continue to keep the CFO from shutting it down,
Right.
Until you get there. And that was really the amount of times the CFO tried to shut down broadband in right around 96, 97, 98. Just, you know, this is never going to make it. You know, let's just raise rates on HBO and keep going, shut this down. It's the best thing to do. And the fights that we did for that, the fights that I did for X1, the fights that, you know, all of these around are ones that you have to go because the CFO is doing their job. So
well, let's talk about X1. You know, Comcast came out with X1. The thing that's been so impressive for me is, you know, look at HP. You know, we're a technology company, right? Comcast, you know, has now transformed itself to think about it as being a technology company. But what you don't see a lot of is public companies who are willing to make those kinds of long-term bets.
Yeah.
Everybody's into the quarterly numbers or yearly impacts or whatever. And if you look, when I had conversation with you and your team and talk about how long Brian Roberts, the board, the Comcast leadership has put into X1, it's almost unheard of from a public company perspective.
I think one of the reasons I've got tremendous respect for Comcast and for Brian and for the rest of the team is that they are just very prudent, practical, and they know how much room to give you and how much room not to. But yeah, we asked for a large sum of money for the first year on when we pitched the X1 concept, and we left that meeting getting approval for the first year's budget. And, you know, we're elated for 24 hours, and then all of a sudden it's,
What do I got to deliver?
We've got to deliver. And we were late on that, just like everything, because, you know, when you start these, you know, I don't want to say you're making things up, but things are so complex to say that you absolutely are going to bring it in on a high-tech project like that is impossible. But we were able to show enough promise along the way that Brian and the rest of the senior management team seen the promise, they seen the into it, and they kept the faith, and we've launched it, and it's really been game-changing for the company, to your point, across so many fronts. Not only the product, but allowed us to build technology teams and software
capabilities,
skills.
culture.
Yeah, 100%. That it's really transformed the company, and Brian bought into it along the way, and you know they're very serious about financial discipline and all of that, but they also realize that you can't give a major platform 6 months and then walk away from it and say it wasn't going to make it.
Right. Well, I think the other thing though is that it's not just been an impact to Comcast, it's been the impact to an industry.
Yeah.
Because now if you're partnering or franchising, whatever you call it, syndication relationships with other cable operators, because it really has set a vision for what an experience can be when you put the customer front and center. as that target.
No,
And
it's
that's really been
100%.
transformative for the conversation. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation with Tony. Just as a reminder to the listeners, we're coming up on season 15 for the show. Would love to hear your feedback and thoughts on the show and what we can do in the future to make the show more valuable. So just drop me a note over at phil@killerinnovations.com. And also hop on over to the Innovators community. That's where the conversation continues after each of the shows. So if you've got input or thoughts, love to hear them. Hop over to the innovators.community. And with that, we'll be right back after this quick, short commercial break. Welcome back to Kill Innovation. So, Tony, one of the questions I get a lot of when I hear from people who are either CTOs or now the new buzzword title is Chief Innovation Officers, when someone gets named to that position, they sometimes get a little overwhelmed about what does the role really partake or what should they take as their first steps. Any thoughts about advice you would give to a newly minted CTO and when they're coming into this role?
Well, I think, first of all, it's highly situational.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you're named because the last guy got promoted, the last guy left for a new job, the last guy got ousted. There can be all sorts of pieces. Sometimes you get promoted to this when the company is flying high. Sometimes you get promoted to it when the company is flying low. And I think each of those has an impact. Probably one of the most important things is making sure that you're bringing people with you. And what I mean is not necessarily literally bringing people with you, but you have to have people that want to follow your vision in there. And so going in and telling them all their ideas are stupid and things like that usually isn't the best strategy. And so I think you've got to go in there and you've got to develop the team and you've got to get the team that want to do it. They do want to have somebody who's got a plan. So you got to go in, you've got to have a plan, you've got to have a vision, you've got to have a way that you're going. But then you also really have to have the people that you're leading in the right way that want to follow you. And a lot of that goes into leaning on those people. If you look at some of the greats and a lot of people that work closely with Steve Jobs would say that it wasn't that Steve had amazingly brilliant ideas all the time, but he would recognize great ideas very well and was able to take and see great ideas and then blow them up into bigger and larger things. And I think being a CTO that does have a vision, but then can have his key folks that come up with great ideas, celebrate those ideas, is a key part of it.
Yeah, I think you're bringing the people along, is a pretty interesting role. When I got named as, one of the CTOs at HP, there's an organization that's been around since 1939,
right,
with a culture that was like unbelievably well established,
yeah,
right.
The HP way.
The HP way, Bill and Dave. But when you get named, they're also, in most cases, at least what I have found, is they are looking for some new thoughts, some new thinking, and you're dealing with an organization that's kind of like, oh, everything's going great, don't make waves, everything's cool and fine, and you get all of the what I call the innovation antibodies coming out of the woodwork, who want to throw stones, at it. Did you experience that in any of your CTO roles moving in? Or?
Oh no, it's common, and that is what it's sometimes getting projects across the goal line. I've had people refer to it as running through a minefield blindfolded, as you're trying to get it, because you just don't know whose sacred cow you're stepping on in the companies, who different pieces that you have. But I think if you can get your folks that are part of your team that are enough on side, if you can get, and you have to have a plan that's credible.
Right.
So I mean, it does start with having a credible plan that can be sold, and then you have to sell it in 360. You got to sell it to the folks underneath that are going to help you get it done. You got to sell it to your peers. got to sell it to the CEO,
Right.
and oftentimes the board, and and that. But I think it's really, and then after that, you got to have it sold in, but then you also have to execute.
So in your case, right, and leaving at HP, how much engagement? I had a fair amount of engagement with the HP board. How much engagement do you have in board influence directly? Because you report up to Dave
Yeah.
Watson. Dave reports to Brian.
Yeah. So
Right.
we're
But you guys have a weird, funky, flat, pretty flattish kind of.
it's a flat organization, as you go, but Brian, if you can convince Brian, you've got a deal.
Right.
Okay. And because Brian is very influential with the board, and Brian's not going to try and sell something to the board that doesn't make sense.
Right.
And so usually when we're coming in, it's just to put the polish on the plan that Brian's bought into, and he is pre-selling to the board. But it's at least twice a year that we're in there with the board on various topics.
Is it typically project focused, or is it broader strategy focused?
Well, it can be a variety. Typically for us, it'll be project-specific focus that will come in. We'll talk through a particular project. There's also times when we just want to expose the board to the things that we're doing. So we'll bring them in and show them all the different technology pieces we're working on, and talk through it. And it's we've got Brian and team has assembled what I think is a top-notch board. And so we've got a lot of people that come at you from different ways, but it's pretty positive.
Good. Yeah, I mean, at HP, I won't go through the whole HP board experience, but kind of a similar vein but typically at HP was more M&A focused,
Right.
And that has its own quirks and twists and turns. Now that you've achieved pretty phenomenal success at Comcast. If you look back on your career, all the way back to when you went into Rogers, you've been in the industry for a long time. Knowing what you know now, what would be that one piece of advice you would have given yourself back earlier in your career?
Yeah, it's that's an interesting piece. It's something I've always done, and I give this advice to a lot of people that work for me. And I think is on all of these, I've always been willing to take a step backwards to go forward. And so even within Rogers, when I went to Canada and different things, I took a step back financially in order to get more experience, and it's always paid off. I won't say I took a step backwards at Comcast, but I didn't come here for economics or anything else. I think probably the one piece of advice, with the benefit of hindsight, is I should have set the expectations higher. I should have for myself, for the team, and the rest, because I think we could have done a lot more at the time, and I actually, quite frankly, surprised myself at how much has gotten accomplished.
That's great advice. With that, Tony, thanks again for taking the time.
Thank you.
And joining us for today. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll continue on talking about what's going on here at the Consumer Electronics Show this year. And stay tuned. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break. Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We just had a great conversation with Tony Warner. Tony sharing his own experiences and what he felt it took for his success as Chief Technology Officer at Comcast. I wanted to take this segment and share with you some of my own perspectives of having been a CTO, in my case at Hewlett-Packard from 2001 to 2011, my 10 years there, and kind of my thoughts of the opportunities and the challenges of a CTO in these large multinational organizations. And in my case at HP, coming in and needing to build up new innovation capabilities inside of an organization that has been around since 1938. with Bill Hewlett and David Packard, starting in the garage on Addison Avenue in Palo Alto. At HP, HP had a very unique structure around the CTOs. In fact, it was unique in the fact that I've never seen any other organization that had it at that time. When I joined and when I was asked to take on the CTO role, there was actually, and there actually is, multiple CTOs inside of HP. So Shane Robison, who is HP's Chief Strategy Officer, put together a structure whereby product lines or divisions had their own CTOs, and those CTOs had responsibilities within their group. What was very unique in the structure, which actually helped a lot deal with all of internal corporate politics, is all of the CTOs report into corporate headquarters. They did not report to the presidents of any of the divisions. So even though I may have been the CTO for at times the PC business or the printer business, or I had cloud services for a while, I had the gaming business unit, all throughout my career, I didn't have to deal with being underneath a product group who was being measured on short-term objectives. I was part of the corporate group that therefore can take a longer view onto all of the activities that we were doing. And that helped solve a major challenge for any CTO in an organization, and that is the politics. Now, CTOs almost has to be schizophrenic. You have to deal with long-term kinds of strategies, thinking 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 years out. At the same time, you play a critical role in making sure the organization achieves quarterly and annual objectives, whether that be financial or other. And being able to balance both can be quite challenging. And you need good air cover. You need senior executives and senior leadership that is going to back you as you go through this kind of split personality between short-term and long-term. And with the structure that Shane put in place at HP, where the CTOs all were part of a centralized group, and at times there were between 3 of us, and then we grew to 4. I think 4 was kind of the maximum. In each one, in my case, I had, roughly 45% of 45% of HP's total revenue in the area that I was responsible for. So that was what, 120 billion. So what, 50 billion in business, 55 billion in business responsible for. I didn't have to get tied in or pulled into the politics issue. I always had that escape valve to deal with being able to have that kind of balanced perspective. Now, one question I get a lot of is, how did I get to my role at HP from the standpoint of being in that kind of a position? What was it, in my background, history, and experience? In my perspective, it isn't even tied to whether it's a CTO role, but my view is for long-term career success, what I have found and what's worked for me, and I've seen it repeatedly over and over again, is having that wide range and variety of experiences. It is about being in a variety of different industries, having a variety of roles, and having a variety of all of that combined. In my case, and I've shared this many times with you as a listener of this show, that was really how my career got started, was when Bob Davis, my mentor, brought me into my first job coming out of, recruited out of college for. And in that role, albeit I was a software engineer, and then eventually I was made a manager overseeing a software development team. But Bob took it upon himself to start this whole process of having a variety of experiences way outside my comfort zone. So that included having 6 months of sales, where I actually carried a sales quota, 6 months of marketing, 6 months of finance, Yes, I even had 6 months of corporate administration, 6 months in legal. But it was that variety of experiences that I felt started me down this path of being one, well-rounded, understanding that what I was doing on the technology side and how that interplayed through the entire organization, so that it wasn't just tied to, my role is just tech and I'm just cranking out tech and I'm in this little box. It also gave me the comfort feel that you could drop me into anything. You need me to run marketing, you need me to run, to go off and make sales calls, you need me to, be part of a discussion around legal and intellectual properties. The confidence that it gave me that I could drop into any role or function and fulfill that, it may not be as good as somebody else, but I could step in. That confidence allowed me to be bold in the work that I did in the form of creativity and innovation and coming up with new product ideas. And over my career, I've done all of those roles. I've had product management and marketing teams reporting to me. Many times I've had sales teams reporting to me. And I think it's that variety of experiences and also experiences across the industry. I started off right out of college as a division of Print-A-Sol Publishing doing computer-based training. Yeah, CBT. Not sexy. But that was where I started. And then it was, hardware development. And then it was, I did some work with Mountain Computer. If you remember back to then, it was making the very first cards that you could use to generate music on back in the old Apple II days, to biometric security for the NSA, to supercomputers. I was president of a company called Terraplex, and we did massively parallel supercomputers, to doing back office systems for the telecom industry, billing systems, where I ran operations for where we were rendering, 65, 70% of every cellular bill in the United States. None of those industries have any form of overlap, but that variety of experiences, each of them adding on to an experience or expertise. When I got to HP and had my interactions with Shane and Mark Hurd and the rest of the C-levels at HP, my ability to converse, have a Rolodex across all of those industries, have the ability to understand each of those industries, that was, I think, the value add rather than just the technical expertise. So my encouragement is, if you have your eyes set on a CTO role, or you're in a CTO role and you're looking to round out your experiences, look for those opportunities to reach out and be part of, contribute to, and actually lead, in some cases, teams that you typically would not be comfortable in leading, even maybe doing, regional sales roles for a while. And I would never trade that variety of experience. I think that's what's equipped me to have the career success that I've had, is, again, that variety of experiences across a variety of industries. And I was just hugely fortunate to land at HP with a leadership team, an organizational structure, and people that I, highly respected, that we could achieve the success that we did. So with that, we're going to wrap up this segment. Don't go anywhere. When we come back from this commercial break, we have a new episode of 5 Minutes to New Ideas, where we ask you a question that could be unique, challenging, funny, to hopefully give you an opportunity to think about your opportunities in a unique and different way. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Back in the early days of this show, I would share what I called a killer question in each episode. These questions were designed to be used in your personal, team, or organization's innovation efforts. Now, based on feedback from listeners just like you, we've decided to bring it back with some improvements. Each episode of the Killer Innovations has a segment that I'm now calling 5 Minutes to New Ideas. It's designed for the creative mind looking for that next great idea. Each episode will challenge you to think differently about yourself, your business, and your products and services by asking unique, funny, and sometimes crazy questions. These questions are designed to force you to look beyond the obvious and to uncover ideas and opportunities you never before considered. So, get out your notebook and be ready to uncover that game-changing idea. Here is 5 minutes to new ideas. Did you know that the opposite of bravery is not cowardice? The opposite of bravery is conformity. Doing everything the same way that everybody else does it. Being like everybody else, thinking the same way everybody else does. Conformity is the safe approach, which actually puts you at more risk. It takes bravery to step out and leave the warm space of conformity and try something new. Now let's be honest. Conformity is comfortable. You know what to expect. You conform to the norms of an office. You conform to the norms of society. It's predictable. The problem is the world out there is changing whether you are ready for it or not. Conformity is not preparing us to compete and succeed. What constitutes success in the future is not the same thing that defined success in the past. When I started my career, success was defined as doing the tasks that our boss assigned to us, and doing those well. Then getting our performance review, and then getting our 2 to 3% pay increase, and then wake up every morning and repeat, and then repeat it every day for the next 30 years of our career. In the new emerging creative economy, the definition of success is different. The definition of success in the creative economy is your ability to create ideas that create significant value for the organizations that you are a part of. It's your ability to create those ideas. And this creative economy is coming much faster than any of us predicted. The ability to succeed in this new economy is going to be based on learning how to take a natural ability that we all have and use creative thinking and ingenuity to solve problems and identify new opportunities. In a recent study by Adobe, only 25% of the population believe they are creative and applying it in their jobs to create value. Therefore, 75% of the world's population do not see themselves as creative and are not ready to compete in the creative economy. What does that say about our economic future when only 25% of the workforce is ready? Now, it's not all doom and gloom. I'm not that pessimistic. I think we have a bright and exciting future. Why? My grandkids. My grandkids are the perfect example of being highly creative. I'm amazed at how many different ways they can take a toilet paper roll and turn it into a creative toy. They have no limits to their imagination. Why? Because they don't care what you think about them. They are not looking for acceptance. They know they already have it. In their minds, when they do something incredibly cute and funny, they don't see us laughing at them, but instead they see our joy in what they have created. They don't understand yet the concept of conformity. They're still exploring and they're experimenting. They aren't letting others tell them how to think or how to act or what to wear or what should make them happy. They are avoiding the conformity trap. And we all need to do whatever we can to protect ourselves and our kids, and in my case, my grandkids, from this trap. So why do 75% of the population think they are not able to contribute to the creative economy? They don't see being creative, being innovative, as being normal. They believe creativity is a special gift, a gift they didn't get. And this is a lie. Everyone is born creative. Everybody's born to innovate. Creativity and innovation requires risk, and risk of failure is not comfortable. It takes a lot to step out and share your creativity, to show off your ideas. We as a society need your human ingenuity and creativity to solve some of our biggest problems and create the opportunities for the future. It was creativity and human ingenuity that came up with the polio vaccine, and it was creativity that put the man on the moon. It was creativity under pressure that saved the Apollo 13 astronauts and brought them home safely. And it was creativity that invented the microprocessor, which is what enables the electronics that we are all carrying around in our pockets. So what is the secret to career success in this creative economy? 1. Do not let conformity control you. And 2, take risk and use your natural creative ability to solve problems and create opportunities. Sounds simple, doesn't it? Find that creative courage and be brave, and remember, bravery is not the opposite of cowardice. Bravery is the opposite of conformity. Stepping out and taking risk is the perfect example of not conforming. So be brave and go change the world. I'm Phil McKinney, and thanks for listening. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join in. If you have any comments or suggestions, drop me a note at phil@killerinnovations.com. Beyond this show, I write about my personal experiences of being in the innovation game for the last 2 decades. Topics include innovation, creativity, culture, team building, metrics, frustrations, leadership, and how to win. You can find that content over at philmckinney.com. Now, the reason I started this show back in 2005 was to pay back my early mentor. My first mentor, Bob Davis, invested an immense amount of time in training and coaching me, which had a major impact on my career. When I went back and asked him how I could pay him back, he laughed and said I couldn't. I had to pay it forward. If I could ask for a favor, could you help me pay it forward? How? 1, by giving us a rating wherever you get your podcast, as that helps spread the word. And 2, by telling others about the show. If you want to be part of the conversation between the shows, I hang out in the Innovators community on Slack. The Innovators community is a private community of vetted innovators who help each other succeed. Check it out at theinnovators.community. This episode of Kill Innovations was produced by the Innovators Network. You can find the show notes and the entire show catalog going back to 2005 at killerinnovations.com. I'll talk to you next week, and in the meantime, go out and change the world with your killer innovation. Bye-bye.